I'm hoping that this talk will be a little bit playful, a little bit fun, and also a little bit informative about Zen. So I'm going to start off reading something that in our Quantum School of Zen, the very first interview, uh, you're given a poem to read, and many of you online have, and in this room have done it. Many have not. So let me just read it, and that'll start us off. It's called The Human Root. Coming empty-handed, going empty-handed, that is human. When you are born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there is one thing which always remains clear. It is pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then, what is the one pure and clear thing? Then, what is the one pure and clear thing? Life and death coming and going, we don't really understand. I don't know about you, but I know that I can make up a lot of stories about it. But when I look into those stories and wonder where they came from, I realize that I truly don't know. And this not knowing is the beginning point of practice. This not knowing is what opens up the world to us. So, in my mind, quite strangely, I want to talk tonight about reincarnation. When I looked at it, I don't think I've ever given a talk on reincarnation. And I start out with not knowing because fundamentally, that's how I hold the question of reincarnation. I don't know. Even before I came into Zen practice and into the Buddhist world, there was some idea of reincarnation. And I think maybe all cultures, I don't know, but I think even in American culture, there's been this undercurrent about this idea of reincarnation. But we don't really know. We don't really understand. But conventionally, we get this idea. I used to be somebody else. I lived and died as that other person. And then somehow I was reborn as this person. And fundamentally, if you follow that all the way through, then at my death, eventually I will be reincarnated into some other being. In Buddhism, they give you a little bit of a jab where they say, yeah, you may be reincarnated into another being, but you don't know what kind of being that is. They say in Buddhism, it's quite rare to be given a human body. One thing I read, it said, it's as rare as dirt sticking to your fingernail. Happens sometimes, but usually it just falls right off. So we like to think, okay, if I'm going to be reincarnated, my next life is going to be better than this one. But I also might be reincarnated into a microbe, or maybe a piss ant, or a cockroach, or just some bug that gets stepped on in the street. We like the exotic stories. I'm going to be my past life. If I remember my past life, I was the king of India. Well, that's nice, but it's more likely that I was one of the slaves in India than I was the king. So I watched a video one time. I wish I could remember the name of it. The closest I've come to is Magical Child. And it was about this Tibetan Rinpoche who had died, and he had a young monk as his protege who got really involved in finding his teacher's reincarnation. And they did a really good job of showing the process. This young monk searched, he went through villages all around Tibet and actually found this young boy that he thought likely was the reincarnation. So they brought this boy to all the senior lamas, senior rinpoches, and they tested him. And the way they test them is they give them, like for example, they laid out three sets of beads in front of the little boy, and they told the little boy, pick the one that was yours. And the little boy picked this up. And then they did a few different objects that they tested the boy on. And at the end of the test, they said, yes, you are the reincarnate of this lama. The young 20-something monk was just thrilled. And the documentary goes on to show the training of this young boy. And I don't really actually remember how it ends. But there was one point in the documentary that really hit my mind. After the young boy is declared the Rinpoche, his attendant took him to his old hermitage. And the hermitage had been abandoned, I suppose you could say, after the death of the Rinpoche. So they go to this hermitage, and you could see them kind of working the door, and they finally open the door, and they walk into the hermitage. And the first thing the little boy says is, where did the hole in the floor come from? And indeed, there was a hole in the wood planks on the floor. It was, at least how I took it, he knew exactly where he was, and he knew that that hole in the floor wasn't there when he died. And of all the things in the documentary, that hit my mind. Maybe. I'm pretty agnostic. I'm a skeptic. I'm a Western skeptic. I don't particularly buy into things that I can't feel, taste, touch, and think. So, although probably if somebody knows me well enough, they'll see all the ways I have these kind of ideas and views of things that are not rationally based. But that point when he saw the hole that wasn't there before, that hit my mind. Maybe. Pretty recently, in the last month or so, there was an article in the Washington Post, I think it was, and it was all about these children who, somewhere around the age 3, 4 years old, they start to remember things that they really don't have any reason to know. Like, I remember one of the examples is this little girl started to have this imaginary friend. And of course, kids that age have imaginary friends. But this was different. And the parents recognized that this was different. This child knew things about things that she wouldn't have any real reason to know about. The article goes on to say that there's a center, I believe it's at the University of Virginia. It may be some other school in Virginia, but I'm pretty sure it was Virginia. And some professor there, starting, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, started to hear about these stories and started just tracking them. And I think, again, don't trust my numbers, but I think they were up to around 1,000 cases where the kids just kind of knew things they shouldn't know. And I remember again, don't take these stories exactly as fact, but I believe there was a book written about this town in Pennsylvania where there were some very important Civil War battles, and people would be born with memories of the battle that nobody could really account for. So, as you can see, I'm kind of interested in these stories. I almost have a voyeuristic interest in them. And also, I just love to get my mind blown. I love for something to happen that shakes all of my belief system, because I've practiced long enough to know that my belief system is my made up system. There may be some truth in what I believe, but it's all made up. It's all conditioned by my own particular way of viewing things. So when suddenly things arise that surprise me, that shake the foundations of my belief system, for me, that's a blessing. For me, that's like, oh yeah, return to zero. You really don't know. And I remember early on in my Zen practice, people talking about how when the Buddha taught, the Buddha sidestepped the question of God. Basically, the point was whether there is a God or isn't a God isn't important, because what I'm teaching is where suffering comes from and how to alleviate that suffering. And whether there is a God or isn't a God doesn't really matter for that. So Buddha was truly atheistic. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just said, it doesn't matter. Here you are. What are you going to do with this life and this situation that you find yourself in? So the best I can do is rest in not knowing. And the stories I told are kind of the conventional view of reincarnation, that the soul transmigrates, in a sense, through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And, you know, some people believe it and some people don't. Does it matter or doesn't it matter? Kind of interestingly, I've reached an age where, how can I explain this? Where I could see, if I truly believed in reincarnation, if I truly believed, and if you get into the kind of the Buddhist view of reincarnation, it all has to do with karma. It all has to do with what you make in your life. And there are these complicated formulas that Buddhist scholars over the ages have had that will determine at what level you die, and that somehow helps determine what level you're born into. I don't know. But if it's true, what I do with the rest of my life may really be important. Like if I were to say, I'm 70 years old now, I've done my best, I've given it a good shot, I'm going to take these last 20 years and take it easy. And I'm just going to start to enjoy the fruits of my labor and maybe move a little bit even more into my hedonistic views or desires, and not worry too much about the meaning of all this. But if I believe in reincarnation, then you can't rest. Because in the Buddhist view, you may have a great life, but really all you're doing is using up your good karma. So you may live in the God realm in this life, but you use that all up and you might be reborn into the hell realms. So it means each moment makes a difference. And if I really believe in this transmigration, then I better be careful. I better stay with it. If you think of, I guess it was Maslow with his hierarchy, that's a pretty low level of attainment to think, my life is going to suck later on if I don't do good now, so I really better stay with it. It may be a motivator, but it's a pretty low-level motivator. It's not really altruistic. It's really about what's going to make my life better. But here's the problem. Here's the rub. What the Buddha taught is that attitude is the path to suffering. If I'm just going to do it to get something better, ultimately I'm going to be disappointed. That, Buddha, the very simple way of Buddha's way of looking at suffering is that suffering has to do with desire, and we suffer when we don't have what we want, but we also suffer when we have what we want and we're afraid to lose it. We start building walls around things to protect what we have. In many Buddhist ceremonies, at some point, there's this line where that says something like, "May the merits of my efforts be given to others." That's not about, I got to keep all the merit because I need a better life next time. So I hope I'm raising as many questions for you as I am answering. That's my purpose. So I thought I would tell you my fantasy, my reincarnation story. So, and I could make rational, logical sense of this, but it's completely made up. So I'm not even saying I believe this, but I could make up this story. I was born in 1953, in September of 1953. I wish I knew exactly when the Korean War ended, because that would probably be valuable for this. But in my fantasy, I died in the Korean War. And somehow, and I suppose in this story, I was a Korean soldier. And I died in the Korean War. And for some reason, I ended up being reincarnated into this Jewish family in suburban New York in 1953. And I went through my childhood and had these various experiences. And by the time I was early in my high school years, I started to have great doubt. I started to question what the meaning of life was. I started seeing that the world around me felt inauthentic, and that I was looking for something real, something that, I don't know, something that was authentic and real. So I made a beeline for Korean Zen. I went to college. I got further into this journey of what am I? What is this? I left my family, moved 3,000 miles away into this Zen Buddhist commune that I don't think I even knew what Zen Buddhism was before I moved onto this community. I read the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. The first night I was there, I read the whole thing overnight, and I was shaking my head. Yes, 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 that's it. Yeah, that's why I'm here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And 4 years later, I met Zen Master Bon Soeng. And once I met Zen Master Bon Soeng, a Korean Zen master, I never left this tradition. Vipassana Buddhism grew up all around me in the Bay Area. People I eventually became close friends with. My wife, for a long time, was part of that community. And there was some real affinity that I could have been drawn there, but I never went. I didn't know it. Really, I didn't know almost anything about it. I knew it was out there, but I was satisfied where I was. And I'm kind of a seeker. I look around, but I just stayed put. So that's my story. Is it true? Is it not true? None of us will ever know. We don't know where we come from. We don't know where we go. But in that poem, The Human Root, it says, originally, this cloud doesn't exist. Where does the cloud come from then? I can't really answer that question for you either, but I can give you my sense of things. The cloud is created by the conditions. It's my sense that conditions draw life, cause and effect. The circumstance as it is now creates life in this moment. Life is almost drawn into, sucked into the circumstances. So what am I? What is this? So if reincarnation really happens within a constructed reality, I was trying to think about what kind of realities pull things in. There's kind of cultural legacy that draws life. We carry family legacies, cultural legacies, racial legacies. So again, we don't know where we come from. We don't know where we're going. But somehow or another, this little being, Jeff, it was named, was born into this family in suburban New York. And when we're born, it's actually a biological phenomena, right? My parents, the sperm of my father, the egg of my mother, what is it? 23 chromosomes from each come together. And out of that created this physical incarnation, which carries the genetic material of we don't know how many generations. And not just the genetic material, but also the emotional material, the cultural material. I saw in the paper today that they found there's a ruin in Mexico in the Yucatan Peninsula called Chichen Itza. And back in the 70s, they were building an airport, a small airport right next to the ruin, to the pyramid. And when they dug, they found this underground cave almost, and they found all of these bones from bodies. And what they determined were these were sacrifices that the Mayans were doing way back when. And in the story that everybody thought they understood, the sacrifices were young virgins, female virgins, young women, female virgins. Well, when they tested these bones with DNA, and it took them years to be able to do this, they found out that they were actually young boys. And often they were siblings. Sometimes they were twins. So the whole story that anthropologists and people who have been studying this, archaeologists for years, had created was actually not true. And then they did DNA testing on the local population, and they found that they're direct descendants. There's absolutely no question that these folks who live around Chichen Itza were the same ethnic group who lived 1,000 years ago in the area. And the article closes with this beautiful thing. One of the locals says, you all have so much respect for this culture, this Mayan culture, and the people who were living then. And now you know we are their direct descendants, and really you treat us with racism, and you look down on us, You don't treat us as anything that's important. But our ancestors are important, but we're not. And that's how the article ended. That's the human mind. We make all these judgments and ideas and beliefs, and we turn them into an ideology. And in that doing, we dehumanize everything. That plea, treat me the way you have reverence for the old bones. But we humans, Zen Master Bon, one of my favorite lines that he used to say was, human beings' number one bad animal. Instead of reverence for each one of us, for this miracle of incarnation, we treat each other with disrespect, with scorn, derision, and a kind of competitive quality of, I need to get mine, so I'm going to cheat you if I need to get mine. And that's the mind that actually drove me to Zen practice. That's the mind of having practiced for 50 years now, recognizing how difficult it is to actually uproot those misgotten and sadly unfortunate belief system. So, of course, I've gone way over where I expected to, but I want to finish with really what I think is the most important aspect of reincarnation in our Zen practice, which is right now, what are you doing? The way we talk about karma is a little bit different than the conventional view. What karma is the condition, the action, and the result. I remember Zen Master Bon using this example. He said, here's a match, and imagine this unlit match. That's the original cause. Then the action is taking the match and striking it. The result is fire. That result is now the next cause. Here's this fire. What do I do with the fire? If I turn around and light those candles, I create light. If I take this match and I light this card, I could burn up this whole building. Reincarnation, from the strictly Zen perspective, is this match becoming this fire. Now we have a new cause. Each moment is complete. This match is now reincarnated as fire. Does it reincarnate into light, or does it reincarnate into burning down the building? That's on us. Each moment, what action do we take with this condition, and what result do we manifest? That, my friends, is reincarnation. What are you doing right now? And how are you doing it? That's what we have some say about. In the media these days, there's a lot of talk about, do we have free will or do we not have free will? And there's a lot of movement towards, we don't really have nearly as much free will, if any at all, than we think we do. We respond to signals that we're not even aware of. Smells determine so much of what we do, and we don't even know that it's determining. So keeping great doubt is the fundamental practice point. It's like it's our one main tool. Once we keep great doubt, we have a possibility of clear seeing. We don't have to know everything. If our eyes are clear, we can perceive. And through that perception, we can see what needs to be done. The Bodhisattva Kwan Se is said to have 1,000 hands, and each hand has an eye in its palm. So as it reaches out, it can see what needs to be done. It's not a big fat brain that knows everything on the palm of its hand. It's just clear view. What is this? And from that point, we have the possibility to create a kind of reincarnation that brings peace, some healing, maybe some cooperation, rather than all of the chaos, meanness, harshness, and cruelty that we also can bring into this world. So be careful. What we do makes all the difference in the world. Thank you all very much.